Good morning and welcome to today's webinar. Today's topic is Logistics Uncomplicated, Navigating Your Supply Chain During COVID-19. Before we get started, I'd like to take a moment to go over a few housekeeping items. My name is Mark and I'll be your moderator for today's webinar. We want to make sure today's presentation is extremely valuable for you, so we ask that you submit all questions by clicking on the question button in the control panel and typing your question there. Now, as many businesses begin to recover from the impacts of COVID-19, it's important to understand best practices for effective supply chain management. With transportation in the US operating at roughly 85% of its usual activity, navigating and proactively planning for your company's logistics is crucial now more than ever. Ascent's transportation experts address the most common questions and areas of confusion that relate to minimizing supply chain disruptions. This webinar will be a great opportunity for you to refresh your knowledge of ever-changing shipping criteria and learn how Ascent can help to keep your supply chain moving. I'm proud to say that the folks at Ascent continue to save our Cose and GCP members hundreds of thousands of dollars in shipping and freight savings every year. And with that, I'd like to have our presenters introduce themselves before we jump into today's discussion. Brooks, how are you today, sir?
Good, Mark. How are you?
I'm doing great, thank you.
Hey, thanks for having us. So my name is Brooks Wise. I'm the Regional Vice President of Sales for Ascent Global Logistics. Been with the organization right at about 12 years now, based in lovely Mobile, Alabama. Kind of give you a little background. Obviously, I've been around 12 years. Ascent itself has been a partner of Cose for right at about 20 years. This portion of Ascent was developed to work with buying groups, associations, etc. Cose being one of the first ones that we partnered with, and as you can tell, it's been a long-term partnership going on roughly 20 years. I mentioned earlier. Just to kind of put it in perspective, if you look over the last 10 years, you know, we're roughly about 350 customers within Cose that have utilized us to ship. A little over 190,000 shipments at about 44 million in revenue. So it's a very entrenched partnership. We've been able to work with a lot of members to help them with their supply chains. And obviously today's session is to continue that partnership and talk about some ways we can do that today and the way companies are reacting due to the COVID-19 crisis. So Jason, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. I'm looking forward to today's webinar. I've been with Ascent Global Logistics for the last 4 years. I'm a Director of Business Development based out of Stowe, Ohio. Been working closely with Cose for the last 2 years, helping a lot of members with supply chain solutions, and look forward to being able to continue supporting members. Zach?
Yeah, hey, good morning, everybody. My name is Zach Severin, and I am with Ascent Global Logistics, and I am a Director of Strategic Accounts. I've kind of been involved with a lot of different things, but my main area of focus and what I'm really going to be presenting today on is the international piece of international logistics and international transportation. I'm excited that this webinar is going on. It's certainly a hot topic. I don't believe there's hardly any industries globally that are unimpacted by the results of the coronavirus and COVID-19. And I really applaud everybody today for jumping on here and learning and taking these steps to secure their supply chains, whether it's domestically or internationally. And hopefully today we can share some information with you guys. And if there's any questions, I know we would certainly love to get some of them from you.
Great. Gentlemen, thank you all for being here. I'll get started with the first question, maybe a more broader question for you all. So can you describe exactly what's happening in the industry and what are people doing to react?
You know, Mark, that's a great question. You know, what we're seeing on the domestic side, so obviously you have the cost factor. People are trying to recover from possible shutdowns, et cetera. So you have the true freight charges. What can we do to reduce charges? The bigger thing we're seeing is where we've had impacts to staffing, where companies had to lay off, reduction in their staff force. Therefore, maybe who used to do all the audit and pay is no longer present with their organization. So they're looking at ways to possibly outsource that or make it more efficient. They're also looking at ways to diversify their carrier base and look at, you know, maybe things they haven't looked at before. And moving their freight, you know, whether it's outbound shipments to customers or inbound freight coming from their vendors, raw materials, you know, that was a huge impact as well. we saw a lot of companies that remained in business and continued to ship, but would get bogged down because their vendors, possibly got shut down due to COVID lockdowns, et cetera. So now trying to help them get that supply chain, full of raw materials again has been a big step. Most people have looked for us to help with, different aspects, whether it's IT, technology, really gaining efficiencies. And then obviously, what can we do to help them from a carrier standpoint, diversifying carrier bases, reducing costs, et cetera. Jason, I don't know if you want to chime in on some things you've seen, some experiences you've seen in the past few months now.
I'd like to touch on what I've seen from the carriers side of things. So just like shippers have been impacted from COVID-19, carriers have been impacted as well. The carriers have been making layoffs. They were down about 30% overall. And as companies start to come back, we are seeing, the carriers' transit times are delayed as they're bringing more shipments on from companies opening back up. So, biggest impact that I've seen that's impacting a lot of shippers is just the slower transit times and, really having to explain to shippers the impact that carriers are having due to COVID-19 and those layoffs made.
And Zach, I know you've seen a lot of changes on the international side. That's probably been the bigger piece, more so than domestic. I don't know if you want to elaborate what you've been up against internationally.
Yeah, no, Mark, certainly agree with Brooks. A fantastic question. Certainly a lot has changed. Changes from an international perspective, we could probably talk an hour or two specifically on that, looking at it from everybody's perspective, whether you're a shipper or manufacturer exporting out of the country, if you're a buyer of raw materials or even finished goods from overseas and you're an importer of record, changes have been taking place with that. But then the carrier side, as Jason spoke about as well, we've kind of been in a movement on the international side. We started getting glimpses of this out of Asia, back in December. So it really came into the States, I think probably in the media, probably around Chinese New Year, middle of February, and then obviously middle of March is when things really shut down. So from the international side, these impacts have really been going on before 2020 even started. But air freight is a massive, massive area of logistics, and global capacity for air freight obviously has gone down from a passenger perspective and a cargo perspective as well. Embargoes have been put on certain regions and certain countries. Statistics vary depending upon what publication you're looking at, but conservatively, anywhere between 60 to 70% of the air capacity has been taken out globally. So getting space has been tight. Rates have just been skyrocketed. The impacts of PPE and needing to get goods and protective equipment to frontline healthcare workers has been at a forefront. So air rates, airspace have been incredibly tight. Air rates typically for a per kilo basis, and I'm talking import here, have been probably anywhere between the $3 to $5 range. Over the past 6 weeks, we've seen those quadruple anywhere between $15 to $22 per kilo for standard carriers, non-price gouging. That's just how much airspace has been reduced in the market. Same thing on the ocean side of things. Again, conservatively speaking, you hear projections where 30 to 40% of the global market, the global capacity has been taken out of the market. We've seen in the past probably 3 to 4 weeks that crunch pick back up as manufacturing and shipping globally returns. So that's a fight right now to get space. But those are the biggest impacts from a carrier's perspective, and certainly agree with Brooks and Jason. Cash is king. Cash as much as they can, pausing purchase orders and delaying those as long as possible to hold on to that. So those are some of the impacts that we've seen specifically on the international side of it.
So thank you, Zach. So speaking of carriers, and getting back into the swing of things, what can our members do to perhaps become a preferred shipper with Ascent?
Brooks, if you don't mind, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to start this one off.
Sure.
So I think that, members, developing a trusted relationship with the carriers and the logistics partners that they're working with by being transparent in their communication. So in other words, earlier we were talking about carriers and the layoffs that they're making and the longer transit times that we've seen from carriers. So letting your providers know, hey, this shipment needs to deliver on this date, they can help you ensure that it's going to get delivered within that time frame. So for example, I have a volume shipment, an LTL volume shipment that's 7 pallets, they over 10,000 pounds. If I'm moving that shipment and I need it to deliver on Friday, if I look at a volume LTL spot quote, I know that it's not going to get there. It's not going to be guaranteed by Friday with a volume LTL spot quote. So I may want to communicate that to my provider that, hey, I had this quote, but I needed to get it there Friday so they could help me with alternative solutions of maybe looking at a dedicated truck, and maybe moving it as another option to ensure that it is getting delivered within the time frame that I need. We're looking at alternative shipping solutions. I would also say that, when the carriers are arriving, one thing that can help to be a preferred partner with the carrier is making sure that your freight is ready when the driver arrives. And also when they're making the deliveries, getting them unloaded in a timely manner is going to help make sure that you're that preferred carrier partner.
Yeah, just to piggyback onto that, Jason, Mark, a lot of what we're seeing, used to be freight was freight. The carriers priced it based on the lane, the weight, the class, et cetera. Now they're starting to look more into, is that customer easy to do business with? And they factor that into their costing. So as you're doing price negotiation, it's no longer just what does that skid look like and where are you shipping. It is, how easy are you to do business with? Obviously, their world has changed as well from a safety perspective and drivers being allowed inside facilities and hours of deliveries and things like that. So they're really looking at the overall picture now and who they work with and base their pricing accordingly. So that's probably one of the bigger changes we've seen during this time is really when they drill down to start costing shipments and factoring in that new thing, so to speak, of, the ease of doing business. And Zach, I don't know, I'm sure there's been some changes in the international front.
Yeah, the international piece of logistics and transportation, there's that added compliance side of things with U.S. Customs and the government really overseeing a lot of aspects with that. So obviously U.S. Customs is the biggest oversight organization with regards to imports. The USTR and the Department of Commerce regulate the export side of compliance. But documentation is really, really big with international shipping. It's one thing if you're shipping baseballs, it's another thing if you're shipping animal supplements, a food item, a controlled substance, something considered high value, high target, whatever that may be, can certainly impact situations. But we have I was just listening to a conversation not too long ago of a company bringing in some additives for food supplements out of China. It will be mixed here in the States and then re-exported to Ecuador, of all places. It's going to be used in fish meal. So this was a new additive that they were bringing in. So new to the importer, but shouldn't have been new to the manufacturer or the blending facility overseas. I want to say it was China, but somewhere out of Asia. And then just didn't have the proper certificates that were needed for that. So it sat, totaled up thousands of dollars of storage and obviously caused some problems. So not only is it an expensive learning lesson, but you somewhat get your company's name on the radar for whomever's overseeing that certain commodity. So documentation would be the biggest thing that I would certainly recommend importers and shippers being familiar with. There's upcoming changes with NAFTA. So if anybody's familiar with NAFTA, on July 1st, it's scheduled to switch over to the USMCA, which I can certainly talk about a little bit later, but that's another documentation change that's going to take place. Instead of a NAFTA certificate, a USMCA certificate will be needed. So that's the biggest thing. The second thing I would say is from an international perspective, booking in far as advance as possible. U.S. wasn't hit as hard as some other countries, specifically Asia, China, some of those other Asian countries, and India, where it was completely shut down. You couldn't cross county lines. And now that shipping has picked back up, manufacturing has picked up globally, space has become tight. So advanced bookings, if you normally book a shipment 3 weeks out, I would try to extend that out to 5 weeks to be able to maintain some consistency with those carriers, with your forwarder, and to get that product moved in a timely fashion.
Hey, Zach, quick question. This just came up, and maybe you can speak to the group. Have some customers asking, they're looking at starting to source from different countries, I should say, and get out of China. Is that something you're seeing quite a bit of for your international customers as well?
100%. Yeah. I mean, if you're doing any importing, you're familiar with what people are calling the Trump tariffs that went into place in 2018 and 2019, where depending upon the product, there were a 232 or 301 tax went in place for 25% on top of whatever your ad valorem duty percentage was at that time. A lot of people have looked to get away from those additional taxes. They've looked a lot of different places. You may have heard of nearshoring, where people are trying to bring that supply chain back closer, not necessarily to the United States, but certainly Mexico is a area that people have looked at. Vietnam has been a area that people have looked to source product from. India, Pakistan, some of those other countries have really been a hotbed for places to go to. The one thing that I continue to hear feedback from with people looking to diversify their manufacturing, again, this is looking at from an import perspective into the States, is the quality that you get from some of these other countries and how much they can ship. We had a client that I was speaking with that typically ship about 8 containers out of China from just this one supplier. This is for some furniture items. Typically get about 8 containers per week, and they were wanting to move this to Vietnam, and they could handle less than 2 containers a week. So that's one thing to look at it. But I think over the upcoming years, we will see those situations improve, and we'll continue to see more and more diversification of supply chains away from China if the current administration is reelected in November.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Yep.
I just wanted to quickly remind our live viewers that we want to treat this as an open discussion. So again, if you have any questions for any of our Ascent team here, feel free to find that question box on your control panel and type, and I'll be happy to present your question to our team members here. Zach, yeah, you kind of talked a lot about what I was going to ask next. Presumably, what carriers are doing to adjust during this time, and what do you see going forward from a global perspective? Is there anything else you want to elaborate with about that on a broader scale, or did you just pretty much cover it?
No, I would just really reinforce if you're exporting out of the country right now, you're in a pretty good spot. We haven't seen rates spike a whole lot from an air freight perspective, from a rail perspective, if you're going into Canada or Mexico, in an ocean perspective. But the timing of things have changed. They have certainly reduced the number of vessels going in and out of not only the United States, but other countries as well. Now, if you're looking at importing specifically out of Asia and China, that is where the biggest impact has taken. The economy in China and the other Asian countries has certainly started to pick back up. We are seeing bookings and shipments and containers ready to go, but with the space reduction that the carriers have implemented, and again, we've seen estimates anywhere between 30 to 40% of that capacity has taken out. We've seen containers sitting at the port ready to go, and there's just no vessels right now to get onto. So the most common question is, well, how long is this going to last? And the carriers haven't come out and specifically said this is what they're doing to resolve this. it usually requires change is when that product has now arrived in the United States. The product has been taken out of those containers, and those containers need to get back on a vessel to go somewhere overseas. Well, if vessels aren't coming into the port of Los Angeles or Seattle or New York or Houston, wherever it may be, these empty containers are just going to stack up. And that's typically when you see carriers get back and add those vessels back in to keep the flow of empty containers going. So that's the hottest topic right now when it comes to the importing environment. Air rates have started to come down. Ocean rates now are spiking with the space crunch that it's caused.
You know, Mark, the other side of that, obviously Zach speaks of importing, so these containers are hitting the U.S. ports. What we saw during COVID was the food industry, the paper good industry eating up a lot of the truckload capacity. Therefore, containers where it may have been sitting around could be transloaded onto equipment or were moved to the rail. So things kind of got a little out of balance on the domestic delivery side of those containers. We're starting to see that come back around now and loosen up, but it's certainly the past 90 days or so has been heavily impacted by COVID and the impact it had on the truckload capacity. Again, rates skyrocketed just due to the food industry and paper goods driving that, and we're starting to see a swing the other direction now in the truckload market.
You know, that's interesting. I've also seen that, you know, even during this COVID-19 crisis, you know, petroleum and fuel have been all over the place as well. Can you talk a little bit about how that's impacted the industry as well when you're pricing in these factors?
Yes, so from a domestic standpoint, actually diesel fuel has actually been, I don't want to say an all-time low, but it's been very low compared to the past few years. So that's actually, I guess, been a positive when it comes to transportation costs. Haven't really seen any major swings during this time. It stayed relatively low. I think and I did not look Monday, shame on me, at what the fuel index was. Jason, I don't know if you know off the top of your head or not, but it's still at a relatively low rate based on previous years. I'm not sure, Zach, on the international front, what fuel has done to international transportation.
Yeah, so air cargo has pretty instantly, like the trucking environment, seen those impacts of the fuel. Now, the ocean carriers typically work about a quarter behind what we pay at the pumps. So the market anticipation is in Q3, we'll start to see some of those reductions on the BAF, which is the fuel term used in international shipping. So the anticipation, like I said, we'll hopefully see a drop on that here pretty soon.
And Brooks, yeah, off the top of my head, I didn't look either on Monday as well, so I don't know off the top of my head. But Mark, to kind of go back to your questions on kind of what we're seeing on the impact from carriers, you know, from an LTL standpoint, you know, a lot of the LTL carriers have dropped their service guarantees. One thing that I'm also seeing as well is, you know, so shipment going from Cleveland out to Los Angeles is more than likely going to travel on rail for certain carriers. So more carriers are moving their shipments to rail when it's longer haul due to the layoffs from some drivers. You know, also another big impact that I'm seeing is LTL carriers not accepting extreme length shipments. So usually anything over 12 feet, you know, some carriers will accept it and then other carriers won't. So, you know, my recommendation to shippers anytime they're shipping anything extreme length, just checking with the carrier to make sure that they will come in and accept that freight.
Great, thank you guys. Was there anything else you've noticed in the last 90 days that have maybe a trend that's helped improve the efficiency of shippers, or anything else noteworthy that you want to share with the folks viewing?
I would say, you know, on the domestic side, a lot something that's helping is a transportation management system. So a system that's going to really help streamline their logistics process, be able to get quotes, book, and track shipments. So, you know, a lot of companies with the layoff, you now have that person wearing multiple hats. So looking for a tool that's going to be efficient and be able to do everything in one place to help streamline that process for them. And then another thing that I've also seen is, the outsourcing of freight pay not, not only has it helped companies save money, but it's helping them save time as well as, they've let people go, by being able to outsource it, they're saving time so they can focus on the other things that are important to us.
Yeah, and with that, Jason, Mark, unfortunately, part of our world day to day in the LTL industry is carrier disputes, billing issues. So where companies have reduced their staff due to COVID, they're looking for a partner that can help them manage that. Unfortunately, reways, reclassifications, incorrect billing through the LTL networks is rather common, but it can be a major headache trying to manage it and keep up with it and to negotiate that with the carriers. So that's been the other impact. We've seen more and more folks coming to us looking for assistance with dispute management, consolidating invoicing, or truly doing a true audit for them on the invoicing side.
Yeah, from an international perspective on efficiencies from a shipper or an importer, I'd go back to, cash is king right now, and people are trying to hold on that cash as much as possible, and therefore that inventory management is incredibly important. And so really having some efficiencies with that, being smart with the purchase orders that are needed to whether it's a raw material or a finished good. But then also being cost conscious with air freight, with those rates being so high, instead of paying those high air rates, perhaps do an expedited domestic shipment. So if you're in Cleveland, trucking it from LA or trucking it to LA or to the East Coast, instead of paying those air freights directly out of Cleveland, can be a cost savings. Air rates from New York to Europe versus Cleveland to Europe are going to be cheaper if you can get it to one of those larger airports. So we are seeing a lot of that being done. Ocean carriers have seen the impacts of a premium transit time, and so that's been a popular item. It's still cheaper than utilizing air freight, so utilizing some of those carriers that have premium services to get it to the coast and then move around domestically instead of those high air freight prices. Another one that seems to be a pretty popular item right now.
Thanks, guys. So we touched a little bit about this earlier. I heard it mentioned, but can you talk a little bit more about the importance of remaining proactive and compliant as a shipper?
I think from a domestic standpoint, being compliant with the NMFC manual and knowing the classes that you're shipping is just going to help eliminate rebills and making sure that you're not getting charged extra, especially for somebody that passing the freight charges on to your customer. The last thing that you want is to move something at a class 55 when really it's a class 92.5, and then you get that rebill after the fact, that after the shipment's delivered and you already billed your customer. So to really make sure that you're saving, looking at the NMFCs, knowing the classes and the product that you're shipping, partnering with somebody like Ascent to help you find the correct classes will just help make sure that you're not receiving rebills.
Mark, and on that same note, kind of back to the staffing, we're seeing where people are now kind of wearing a logistics hat that maybe didn't in the past and don't totally understand, okay, it's just a number, it's just class 60, but it actually has major significance in your rates. To Jason's point, heaven forbid something gets damaged, it can impact the claim amount you get, and a lot of people just don't know. So it's certainly good to ask those questions. We do some freight 101 type things to just kind of give the basics of transportation and help people be aware of what the NMFC does to your rates, your claims, your billing, etc.
As you can, when I started in the industry 10 years ago, it was mostly that products were classed at one class. And as the years have gone on, more and more classes are going to density based, and more carriers are reweighing shipments and reclassing shipments because it's a lot easier for them to do it in today's world because of technology. So they had the dimensionalizers and the forklift scales. So now, 10 years ago, it would be a guy walking the dock, and he'd pick 1 out of every 10 shipments. Now almost 9 out of 10 shipments are being inspected because they can take it off the truck. They have the forklift scales. They turn it around on the forklift, put it under the dimensionalizer, and now you have the laser shooting down to give them the proper, pounds per cubic foot to find that glass. So you're going to see, as the years go on, more and more products are going to density-based products.
I know, Mark, you mentioned the word compliance, and I'm sure, Zach, you could probably speak to hours on the importance of compliance internationally. I don't know if you want to touch on that some. I know it's a huge piece of what you're involved in.
Yeah, and I talked about that a little bit at the beginning, just the importance of documentation, specifically if you're working with, again, if you're bringing in a kitchen table is a kitchen table. That's pretty easy. A baseball is a baseball, very easy. If you're dealing with anything that can be consumed by a human, by an animal, something that's applied to a skin, plates, cups, any of those items, any type of firearm, high value, high target type stuff, certainly is the important stuff to understand all the regulations that go on in that industry. Everybody kind of knows U.S. Customs and the role that they play with international shipping, but there are a lot of other federal governmental agencies that have jurisdictions, whether it's Fish and Wildlife, Consumer Product Safety Commission, FDA, DOT, military side of things. And so really understanding the importance of that aspect if you're in any of those industries, and knowing the regulations and the requirements that are needed. I've seen it so many different times, as you said, Brooks, that it could have an impact. From an important thing to be proactive, one thing that I would say on the international side, and I'm sure on the domestic side as well, is consistency. And when I say consistency, not saying that you need to have a shipment every week or every day or every month. It's that if you make a booking for 5 pallets or 2 trucks or 5 containers, that it doesn't get changed every week. I was talking to somebody that works with a shipper that would book 5 containers typically every week, and over half the time they would end up canceling those. And when they would, sometimes it would be after the cut date, and the carrier's having to reach out to the forwarder and saying, hey, what's going on with these 5? And then this forwarder is having to backtrack with the shipper. The carriers understand that we don't live in a perfect world, that consistency can be hard and that things do change. So it's not to say that, oh, I have 5 booked and I need to move it to 3. Don't be scared to do that. But if there's ways to stay consistent, if you make a booking for 3, try to stick to those 3. And that way it can stay consistent for the carrier, so they don't have missing spots on the vessel, or a driver that was supposed to pick something up that's no longer there on the domestic side of things. So those are a couple items I would certainly say are important to being proactive.
Mark, and that's kind of the beauty of the Cose GCP Ascent partnership. That's what we're there for. Our folks, they are located in Hudson or throughout our entire organization, are there to answer questions like that. I mean, I took one yesterday from a customer down in Florida, actually, and she was over engineering, but due to COVID, got to become the logistics manager now as well. I just really didn't understand what we do, didn't want to understand it, but she knew she could come to us and answer and simplify it, and that's what we're there for. So, anything like that comes up, obviously our team there in Hudson is top notch, and they're experts in the industry and can answer questions, no matter how simple, you think it may be. It can be very important.
Yeah, and I can echo that sentiment, Brooks. I've been dealing with Cose and GCP members for many years now, and I know that whenever we ship off, or no pun intended, whenever we ship off a member to Ascent, with whatever questions they have, if they're new to the game or they've been doing it for years in the industry, we know they're in good hands. So it's just a testament to you guys. Zach, I did want to go back to you're my favorite panelist, it seems so far, but I just want to go back to the international side of things with NAFTA and USMCA going into effect on July 1st. Any other things that you foresee these changes impacting shipping and compliance as we know it?
Yeah, USMCA is going to have a drastic change on a few industries. However, 80% of the goods transported will be unchanged. The biggest area that's going to be impacted is the automotive industry. So this would be, certainly a topic that could be discussed at length for probably a full day. But on July 1st, USMCA is going to be replacing NAFTA as the free trade agreement between North America, so Canada, Mexico, and the United States. So if you have a product that is sourced from goods from any of those three countries and or manufactured in a single one of those countries, you can get free trade within North America. There are some stipulations for some products. If you have like a small percentage sourced from overseas, maybe a product or a raw material that isn't accessible in the United States, there are some areas that can change, but typically for a big picture perspective, if something is sourced from one of these three countries and manufactured in these three countries, then you're going to be good to go. NAFTA has been in place for 26 years. It went into place in 1994. Before that, there was a CAFTA deal that went into place in 1988. That was just between the U.S. and Canada. One of the changes that USMCA is going to have is it's going to have a sunset clause for 16 years. So in 16 years from now, something will have to transpire with USMCA. Could it be just updated? Possibly. But unlike NAFTA, which has just continued for 26 years, something is going to have to be done in 16 years on this. It also is going to be ratified every 7 years for that. Now, the main impacts from a shipping perspective, if any of you are doing shipping within North America, is the certificate. I'm sure if you're selling it to somebody in Canada or Mexico, a common question that you get is, can you provide a NAFTA certificate? There will be a USMCA certificate. It is one that can also be done electronically. This stuff is not finalized yet. It's not on the website for U.S. Customs yet, but it's going to be coming. U.S. Customs held a webinar specifically about USMCA a few weeks ago, and programming wasn't available at that time. There was even some programmers that were on that call saying, hey, we've only got 2 weeks. Is this going to get pushed back? And they said no. However, that could change. But right now, it's full go. It's going to go into place on 7/1. And U.S. Customs is going to provide a template for that new USMCA certificate to replace the NAFTA certificate with the information that's going to be required. One thing that I've heard that they're going to be doing that's going to be a little bit different is previously a NAFTA certificate would have to be provided by a shipper. So let's say you are buying something from Canada and you request the Canadian manufacturer and shipper to provide a NAFTA certificate. I believe the thought is now that you'll be able to, if you know that information, you'll be able to submit that electronically, that it doesn't have to be in a certificate form to the shipper. So I think that's been a common battle for people in the past. It's like, hey, we can't get a NAFTA certificate, therefore we're not claiming the preferential free duty and treatment. This should hopefully be able to alleviate some of those challenges. But there's a lot of good information out there on the USMCA and the changes. Us here at Ascent have pushed out a lot of information. So if there's anybody out there that is looking for some additional information, please reach out to any of us and we can certainly get you some more information. Like I said, I would love to be able to go into it full bore. It's just such a high level, specifically on the automotive. So if you're in that industry, you'll want to do your due diligence and you'll want to do some research, and it's going to depend on what that product is that you're involved in. But Brooks, or Jason, from a carrier perspective, I don't anticipate much changes as a result of this going into Canada and Mexico. Have either of you heard anything from a carrier perspective?
No, I don't think there's going to be any major implications there on the domestic side. At least that's what we're hearing so far.
Yeah. Okay.
All right, gentlemen, thank you. I do have one question from one of our viewers here. As the next round of NMFC amendments are set to go into effect on August 15th, can you explain the importance of NMFC and how they impact shipments?
So,
All yours.
okay, so the NMFC, the National Motor Freight Classification Manual, is governed by the government, association, by the NMFC association. So the NMFC, every product has the NMFC item number, and there's a class or classes that are assigned to that NMFC item number. So when you look at a rate of a shipment, a rate for an LTL carrier is going to be based off the to and from, the weight of the shipment, and the class of the product. So the classes range from a class 50 all the way to a class 500. The higher the class, the higher the rate. So, if you're used to shipping something in a class 50 and all of a sudden the NMFC changes and it goes to a class 125, more than likely your rate's going to increase. So knowing that up front and knowing that it's going to impact your rates and looking at alternative solutions, and maybe, okay, how many pallets do I ship? How do I get my density down or get my density to a lower class? When you're packaging a pallet is all important when you're looking at the NMFC.
Yeah, Mark, and we put that information out when it hits the docket. We usually put it out on our website, typically about 30 days out. People can sign up for our newsletter. It's really not an Ascent newsletter. It's more of an industry newsletter, what we're seeing internationally or truckload or LTL, et cetera. But to Jason's point, it can have significant impact to your freight cost. And obviously it can impact claims values, et cetera. Typically, I say the next one's August 15th. And we can certainly get the items to you and to the members of what items are impacted on this upcoming change.
So if I'm new to, let's say, Cose or GCP, and I want to maybe price compare who I'm currently using with Ascent, or maybe I'm new to the industry in general. Like you said earlier, a lot of folks are having to wear multiple hats. What's the best place to start with contacting Ascent, and what do you guys need to have a meaningful conversation that first time you pick up the phone or maybe send an email?
So, as far as we offer a free freight analysis for any member. So in order to do that analysis, all we need is about a month's worth of data. So we can take a look at what they're currently doing and show them what the program is going to save them by using the Cose GCP/Ascent freight shipping program. In order to get in contact with us, they can feel free to reach out to myself. We also have the Ascent Cose webpage that they can go to, fill out the information there in order to have somebody call them. But more than happy to share my information with everybody on this call, and more than happy to help anybody that needs assistance.
Yeah, Mark, and a lot of times we'll put an initial call together with one of our team members, as well as maybe Zach from International, depending on if that's a need, and get an understanding of where you're at with your supply chain today, what's working for you, what's not, and kind of identify, okay, where can Ascent help you? It may not be across the board. It could be just a piece of your business, or it may in fact be, a total global supply chain solution. We've got a group that unfortunately is not on this call today, but it's Ascent On Demand, which is works in the air cargo side of everything, heavy into automotive, heavy equipment manufacturers such as John Deere, et cetera. So there's a lot of things we do that, may not have been put out there in previous conversations, et cetera. But as Ascent has grown over the years, we've got our hands in just about every mode of transportation. And we find when we do these initial kind of discovery type conversations with people and just kind of understand where they are today and where they're trying to get, whether it's a technology play, a rate play, or just a true gain efficiencies throughout their supply chain. And then we roll that into, as Jason mentioned, a full analysis that's completely transparent. we kind of lay it out there, the good, bad, and the ugly, so you can truly make a decision on where we can help.
Appreciate the answers. Gentlemen, was there anything else we didn't discuss today that's maybe folks should be top of mind or maybe should be expressed?
I would say, one thing that just kind of came to mind as we were talking, for me, as members are getting rates with carriers or their logistics providers, keep it in mind the delivery requirements that are needed on the delivery end. So checking with the consignee to see, hey, is a lift gate needed? Are they able to unload the truck, or are they going to need a lift gate? Is it a limited access location? By having all this information up front, when you get your rate, you're going to get the most accurate quote at the beginning if you're able to provide that information to your logistics provider.
Yeah, and I think the other key, Mark, and we touched on it some earlier in the call, people are looking at different avenues to move their freight now, whether it's inbound or outbound. A lot of people have done things the same way for years and years and years, and due to COVID-19, I've had to kind of change up their thinking and go, hey, am I overlooking an option that I haven't used before that could make me more efficient or reduce costs? And that's kind of the conversation that we like to get into both domestically and internationally. We have multiple options to move things for you, whether it's import, export, LTL, truckload, intermodal, et cetera, and we can give that flexibility. And that's kind of what we've seen during this time, is people are looking for those sorts of options.
Yeah, I would applaud everybody, like I said at the beginning, just for attending this webinar. I think it's a fantastic topic. Everybody who put it together and came up with the idea, COVID has had an impact on really every industry, and ways to handle it, new people involved, all those things have certainly impacted all of our lives. So that's my biggest thing, and we're all available if anybody needs anything. I think Jason probably be the starting spot point, and we'll do anything we can to help anybody out, or even if it's a second opinion on anything, we're here for that as well.
Yep.
Mark, I think that, over the years, as I've dealt with Cose members, the one thing that I've liked is all members like to help each other out. And that's only what we're here to do, is help any member out. That's, we've been doing it for the last 20 years, with that partnership. And we just want to be able to help where we can and be able to help answer any questions that any members have. It doesn't matter if they're shipping, once a month to, multiple shipments a year. We're here to help all size members and help anybody who needs the help.
Yeah, that's a great point, Jason. I've talked to a lot of members in the past, and they're not sure if their company is big enough to even have a conversation with Ascent. But I promise you, no matter your size, how big or small you are, Ascent can probably help you learn something new without even using their services, just having a conversation with you guys. So yeah, I appreciate you guys. I applaud you for jumping on today. I don't see any more questions coming in. So unless there's anything else you want to leave off with, we can go ahead and conclude today's meeting.
No, I'm good, Mark. Thanks for putting this together and having us on. We certainly appreciate it. And again, if anybody on the line, has questions or wants to reach out, feel free to reach out to us. Hit our website. More than happy to answer any questions or have a conversation.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, to our live viewers, thank you for joining us and taking time out to learn about the information that Ascent wanted to share with us today. And again, like Brooks said, if you have any questions that pop up, maybe later on today, or you're looking at your document, you're going, you know what, I remember these guys talking about that. Feel free to reach out to Ascent at any time. They're very responsive. Again, no questions too small, no questions too complicated. So again, with that, thank you, gentlemen. I hope you all have a great rest of your day. And thank you for everyone watching.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you.
All right, take care, guys. Bye now.